The bell above the store door rang weakly, like it was tired of announcing things that never got better. Rain pressed against the windows in thin, slanted lines, blurring the neon sign outside and turning the world beyond the glass into a washed-out watercolor. Inside, the air smelled of dust, old cardboard, and coffee that had been reheated too many times. It was the kind of place people only noticed when they needed something cheap or had nowhere else to go. And tonight, it was the kind of place where fear settled quietly in the corners and waited. She felt it before she understood it. That tightening in her chest. The instinct that told her something was wrong even as her hands kept stacking cans on the shelf, one by one, pretending the world was still normal. Her name was Mara, and she had learned a long time ago how to make herself small, how to disappear in plain sight. Life had taught her that attention was dangerous, that hope was fragile, and that survival often meant silence. The men entered without urgency, without hurry, like they owned not just the store, but the moment itself. 3 of them. Loud jackets, louder voices, boots tracking rainwater across the floor. They didn't rush her. They didn't need to. Predators rarely do. They spread out slowly, blocking the aisles, cutting off the exits, their laughter bouncing off the narrow walls like it belonged there. Mara kept her eyes down. She focused on her breathing. In and out. In and out. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it. She told herself to stay calm, to get through the shift like every other night. She told herself this was just another bad moment in a long line of bad moments, and like all the others, it would eventually pass. But moments don't always pass on their own. They cornered her near the back of the store, where the light flickered and the shelves were half empty. Their words blurred together, a mix of mockery and menace, the kind of talk designed not just to threaten, but to humiliate. They circled closer, invading her space, feeding on the way her shoulders hunched inward. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and suffocating, like the air before a storm. Mara thought about all the times she had wished someone would step in. All the times she had waited for help that never came. She thought about how unfair it was that courage was always demanded from the tired, the broken, the ones who had already given everything they had just to keep standing. And then the bell rang again. At first, no one paid attention. Not the men, not even Mara. But something shifted. The laughter faltered. The room seemed to inhale. He walked in soak from the rain, water dripping from the edge of his jacket, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked ordinary at first glance. No dramatic entrance, no music swelling in the background. Just a man carrying the weight of years in his posture, eyes sharp and steady, like he had seen enough of the world to know exactly what mattered and what didn't. His name was Elias. He had not planned to stop at that store. He hadn't planned to do much of anything that night. Life had a way of narrowing his plans down to survival lately. Once, he had been someone people relied on. Once, he had been brave in all the obvious ways. A former firefighter. A husband. A man who believed that if you did the right thing, the world would eventually meet you halfway. Then came the fire he couldn't outrun. The call that ended in smoke and screaming, and a choice that haunted him every night. Save the family trapped upstairs, or the partner bleeding out beside him. He made a decision. It saved one life and cost him another. After that, the uniform came off. The marriage fell apart quietly. The applause faded. All that remained was a hollow ache and a question he could never answer. Was he still a good man if the right choice still destroyed him? Elias had been drifting for a long time, avoiding mirrors, avoiding memories, avoiding situations where he might be asked to step up again. Because stepping up meant risking failure, and he wasn't sure he could survive another one. But when he saw them surrounding her, something old and familiar stirred in his chest. Not anger. Not heroism. Responsibility. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. He just walked forward, his boots steady on the tile, and said the words that surprised even him. Not while I breathe. The store went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. The men turned, sizing him up, smirks forming and fading as they realized something wasn't right. It wasn't his size or his strength that unsettled them. It was his certainty. The way he stood, like the ground itself had decided to rise up and block their path. Mara looked up for the first time, disbelief cutting through her fear. She wasn't used to being defended. Not like this. Not without conditions. Not without being asked to prove she deserved it. The tension stretched thin, fragile as glass. The men tested him with words first, then steps forward. Elias didn't move. He didn't need to. Years of running into burning buildings had taught him something important. Most danger backs down when it realizes you're not afraid of losing. When they finally left, it wasn't dramatic. No cheers. No victory speech. Just the sound of the door slamming and the bell ringing weakly again, like it was finally allowed to do its job. Mara's knees almost gave out once they were gone. Relief hit her hard, followed by something even heavier. Gratitude mixed with shame, the old familiar belief that she had needed saving because she wasn't strong enough on her own. Elias stayed until her breathing slowed, until the shaking in her hands eased. Then he turned to leave, already retreating back into the shadows where he felt safer. But something stopped him. Her voice. Quiet, unsteady, but real. A simple thank you that carried years of unspoken pain. That night should have ended there. A brief intersection of two broken lives. But some moments refused to be small. Over the following weeks, Elias found himself returning to the store. Always with an excuse. Coffee. A snack. Something he didn't really need. Mara noticed, of course. She noticed the way he stood a little straighter each time, the way his eyes softened when he spoke to her. She noticed how he never pushed, never pried, never treated her like a problem to be fixed. Slowly, they began to talk. About nothing at first. Weather, work, the strange people who wandered in at odd hours. Then, little by little, about everything. Mara shared her story in pieces. Growing up in a house where love was conditional and silence was survival. Relationships that mirrored the same pattern. Jobs that took advantage of her quiet nature. Nights spent convincing herself that this was just how life was for people like her. Elias shared his in fragments too. The fire. The guilt. The way he had stopped believing he deserved peace. The way helping her that night had terrified him, not because of the men, but because it reminded him of who he used to be. They didn't heal each other in some perfect, cinematic way. Healing is messy. It comes in steps forward and steps back. Some days Mara felt strong and confident. Other days, the old fear crept back in. Some days Elias felt useful again. Other days, the memories pulled him under. But they showed up. Again and again. Mara started standing a little taller behind the counter. She learned how to say no without apologizing. She saved money. She applied for a course she'd always wanted to take, but never believed she was good enough for. Confidence didn't arrive all at once. It grew quietly, like a muscle that finally remembered its purpose. Elias started volunteering again. Not as a firefighter, not yet, but at shelters, at community centers, anywhere he could be useful without the weight of his old title. He learned that redemption didn't require erasing the past. It required choosing differently in the present. One evening, months later, a different kind of storm rolled in. Power flickered. The store filled with shadows. Panic rose in Mara's chest, old instincts flaring. But this time, she didn't freeze. She handled it. Guided customers out safely. locked the doors, called it in. When Elias arrived, breathless and worried, he found her calm, capable, unbroken. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled without guilt. They never called what happened between them destiny. It wasn't magic or fate. It was choice. Choice to step in. Choice to stay. Choice to believe that one moment of courage could ripple outward and change more than just a single night. Years later, Mara would tell the story differently. Not as the night she was saved, but as the night she realized she was worth saving. Elias would tell it as the moment he understood that being a hero wasn't about flawless victories, but about showing up even when you're scared, even when you might fail. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that courage can be quiet and change can begin in the most ordinary places, take a second to show some love. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and keep coming back for stories that remind us who we can be. Because somewhere right now, someone is feeling cornered. And somewhere else, someone is wondering if they still have the strength to step in. This is your reminder that you do. Not while you breathe. The rain had stopped by the time the sun rose, but the world still looked like it had been through something. Puddles clung to the edges of the street like unanswered questions, and the sky held a pale, uncertain color that comes after a long night of storms. Mara stood outside the store, keys in hand, breathing in the quiet. It felt different now. Not safe exactly, but possible. And possibility, she was learning, was its own kind of courage. She hadn't told Elias this yet, but she was leaving soon. The idea had terrified her when it first appeared in her mind, like a whisper she almost ignored. Leave the store. Leave the neighborhood. Leave the version of herself that had survived by shrinking. For years, the thought of change had felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was ground below. But something had shifted after that night. After him. After realizing that fear no longer got to make every decision for her. Inside the store, routine carried her through the morning. The bell rang. Customers came and went. Life kept moving, indifferent and relentless. Yet beneath it all, her heart was restless. She had been accepted into the course she'd applied for. A real one. With a future attached to it. It meant relocating. It meant risk. It meant letting go. Elias arrived just before noon, like he often did now. Same jacket, still worn, but his eyes held more light than they used to. He noticed things. He noticed the way Mara hesitated before smiling, the way her hands trembled just a little when she handed him his coffee. Something was coming. He could feel it. They talked, but the words stayed on the surface. Weather. A small fire downtown. A dog that had followed him halfway home the night before. The silence between them stretched, not awkward, just heavy. Finally, Mara looked at him and realized that courage wasn't only about standing up to danger. Sometimes it was about telling the truth before fear talked you out of it. She told him. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough. That she was leaving. That she was scared. That she didn't know if she was doing the right thing, but she knew she couldn't stay the same. Elias listened without interrupting. The old him would have tried to fix it, to offer solutions, to protect. But he had learned something important over the last year. Strength didn't always need a shield. Sometimes it needed space. "I think you should go," he said finally. The words surprised them both. Mara blinked, pain and relief colliding in her chest. "You're not upset?" "I am," he admitted. "But I'm also proud of you. And if I tell you to stay because it makes me feel better, then I'd be doing exactly what the world's always done to you." That was the moment she realized how much they had both changed. They spent her last weeks together in small, meaningful ways. Long walks. Shared meals. Quiet laughter. No promises they couldn't keep. No dramatic declarations. Just presence. Just honesty. It hurt, but it was clean pain, the kind that comes with growth. The night before she left, another storm rolled in. Thunder rattled the windows, loud and unapologetic. Mara stood in her nearly empty apartment, boxes stacked like milestones. Fear crept in, familiar and insistent. What if she failed? What if she ended up right back where she started? Her phone buzzed. A message from Elias. Simple. Whatever happens, remember this. You already survived the worst night. Everything else is just learning. She cried then. Not from fear. From gratitude. Mara left before dawn. No dramatic farewell. Just a quiet drive toward a future that hadn't been written yet. As the city faded in her rearview mirror, she felt the ache of leaving, but also the strength of becoming. For the first time, she wasn't running away. She was moving toward herself. Elias watched her go from a distance, hands in his pockets, heart heavier than he expected. Letting go was harder than stepping in had ever been. But as the taillights disappeared, something unexpected settled over him. Peace. The kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it cost you something. Life didn't pause for either of them. Mara struggled at first. The course was demanding. The city was louder. Loneliness hit hard on quiet nights. But she kept showing up. She spoke up in class. She made mistakes and survived them. Slowly, she began to recognize herself in the mirror. Not the scared girl behind the counter, but a woman building something real. Elias faced his own crossroads. Volunteering wasn't enough anymore. The old calling came back, persistent and unforgiving. He stood outside the fire station one morning, heart racing, doubt screaming. What if he froze again? What if he failed someone else? Then he remembered the store. The bell. The words he had spoken without thinking. Not while I breathe. He walked inside. Training was brutal. The younger firefighters didn't know his story, and he didn't offer it. He earned his place the hard way. Through sweat. Through humility. Through accepting that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about carrying it with integrity. Years passed. Mara graduated. She built a career helping others find their voice, the same way she had learned to find hers. Sometimes she caught her reflection in store windows and smiled at how far she'd come. Elias returned to active duty, older, quieter, but grounded. He became the kind of leader who didn't shout, who noticed fear and met it with steadiness. The kind of man people trusted when things went wrong. They stayed in touch. Messages on birthdays. Updates on big days. No regret. No what-ifs. Just gratitude for the moment that had changed everything. One evening, long after that rainy night, a new firefighter asked Elias why he still stopped by that old convenience store whenever he was in the area. Elias looked at the bell above the door, heard its tired ring, and smiled. Because that's where I remembered who I was. And somewhere else, Mara would sometimes tell her students that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like a bell over a door. Sometimes it sounds like someone saying, "Not while I breathe." If this story reminded you that growth is painful,